Okay, No CMO Podcast, episode 27. I've got Zack Naylor here from Aurelius, actually a client of ours. Should be an interesting convo. We're going to get into UX, UI, dev teams, product market fit, all sorts of issues. Kind of before we start, Zack, to give you a little background on the audience, you don't need a CMO. Obviously, you know the agency. We've got a community type audience of aspiring entrepreneurs, marketers, people in the atmosphere of what we do, kind of trying to look to get more tips. To start things off, we kind of ask everybody, how did you get into your current company? How did you end up founding it? How did you become an entrepreneur? You've got a bit of a story, I imagine. So maybe you can kind of just start us off and give us a little background on you, and then we can get into, Aurelius in particular ideas.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so I started my career as a front-end developer and a visual designer. And what I usually tell people is I was a pretty good front-end developer and I was an okay visual designer.
Nice.
But the thing was that I actually liked to design more. I just didn't feel like I was very good at it. But what happened was, through the course of time, doing a lot of front-end work, some visual design, is the design that I felt like I was good at. I realized it wasn't about the visuals and the aesthetics, right? Like it was about how things worked. And a lot of people at that time didn't really consider that as part of design. So I wasn't very good at making things beautiful or visually appealing necessarily, but I felt like I made good decisions about how things ought to work, what people expected and things like that. So I eventually got hired at the first startup I ever worked at. It was a company called ModCloth back when they were headquartered in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from. And I was the first interaction designer they were hired. And that's where I really, started sinking my teeth into doing proper interaction design. And then I taught myself everything I could about user research, because it was at that job where I was doing a lot of new things. So, a little bit of background, ModCloth is or was, I believe they're still around, but
Okay.
They were a women's vintage and retro inspired, fashion retailer, online retailer. Not necessarily my personal lived experience, right? So I had to learn a lot of things about that space and what people expected there that were not my own, right? I couldn't do what we call genius design. And the thing was, like, I kind of felt like a fraud, right? Like,
Right.
I felt like I didn't have the answers, and so if I didn't have the answers, I couldn't be a good designer. What the thing was is, like, I taught myself everything I could about user research and customer research. And I realized that anybody who just claims to have the answer is actually probably lying to you, right? Like the best designers and the best product people are actually getting this kind of feedback and
They're making it
understanding.
up.
Right. I mean, they're making informed decisions. They're not just saying I have the answer. And so, it was there that my love for that really kind of took hold. Fast forward a number of years, I came out here to where I live now in Minneapolis, to a place called the Nerdery, and helped them build their design research and certain sort of strategy practice to do that for clients in a services or consultancy type setting. And the rest is a bit of history, but how that led me to Aurelius for sure was, it definitely started at the Nerdery, and I was doing work for literally every kind of industry you can imagine, every company size you can imagine, from a person with an idea in their basement all the way up to Fortune 100 type companies, right? And helping these people make better, more informed decisions. And I realized that it was less about us building a product. It was more about helping you make the decisions on what products to make. All right. There's a very subtle difference in language there, but there's a huge impact on how you approach that work, even just in that subtle change of thinking. So then, I did a couple more in-house roles of director UX and leading research teams, strategy teams, and stuff like that. And I just realized that while my opinion is the most important part of the work is helping people make the right things, not making the thing. I can teach anybody how to design or build a product, right? And there's a lot of stuff that even automates that now. But choosing which things to design, what products to make, what decisions to make, that's a whole different ballgame, and that's where it really starts. And for me, that all starts with some understanding of your customer. The most successful products, companies, teams, they are doing something that's based on some informed decision of what they learned about their customers through research, through feedback, whatever you want to call it.
Whatever
right?
it was, yeah.
And so what I realized is that there's got to be a better way to do this, because even in in-house teams, and I consider myself someone who was a professional working in this field, we struggled with it, right? How many times have you come across the situation where you go, haven't we done any research about how somebody X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
And where is it? it's all over the place. Emails, spreadsheets, Google Docs, PowerPoint. It sucks to
Not
find.
centralized at all.
Not at all. And so we thought there's got to be a way we can fix that. And that's where Aurelius really came from, right? We wanted to help people make better decisions for their products, companies, teams with the research they do and get more mileage out of that. And that leads me to where we are today.
Do you find it's a specific type of, I guess, customer that understands the product, or is it pretty universal among, design product people that they need to centralize, kind of their customer research? Because I think a lot of people do take a very sloppy approach, right? Whether it's through Google Docs or recording conversations, you're not really drawing conclusions in a succinct way.
Yeah, I would say for us, for sure, it's, design researchers, UX research, user researcher, whatever you call yourself in that field.
Sure.
The field that I kind of come from, they're definitely first and foremost. But it's interesting that you bring up, is it more general? Because there are certainly people outside of that field in absolutely marketing, absolutely in product management, absolutely copywriting, right? So we've actually had a lot of surprises.
Yeah.
And some folks who found us and found value in what we did, because generally speaking, you're right. There's just not a great way for how you collect, analyze, create insight and action from that kind of information. And that's really what we're helping you do. It tends to be most of the time a UX researcher is the person doing that.
Right. Are there any alternatives that people have used in the past that are less sophisticated?
Absolutely.
Particularly with UX researchers.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the old competitor of do nothing, right? And then we have a lot of old competitors of like, well, we use spreadsheets and Google Docs and, whatever other kind of homebrew system stitching together tools that we use today. So it's one of those situations where, we've been quote unquote getting the job done for so long with general business tools, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're great, but they're not built specifically for the purpose. So there's a lot of efficiencies that could be gained from a tool that's specifically built for you. The workflow is designed for you because we understand. I've worked in the field 15 years. I know the work that we're trying to do here. And then in fact, what we then do is integrate with some of those tools in a way that makes a lot more sense than trying to force fit them to work in the way you want.
Yeah, I mean, how do you see the distinction as opposed to like one of the product board or one of the kind of product management tools out there?
Yeah, for sure. So product board is an interesting one because when we first launched Aurelius, I would say we were a little closer to what product board is. We were much more like we were kind of like a product strategy platform. The thing was, at that time, I would say 10% of the people who found us at that time were like, this is awesome. Never seen anything like it. Would love to use it. Great. The other 90% were like, this is cool. Wish we could work this way, but tell me more about that research and insights piece you're doing. So we heard that enough where we realized that was actually a bigger problem that is really in our wheelhouse to solve. So our tool is hyper focused on that and the people doing that work. Whereas product board is more like, again, kind of general, allowing you to manage a product and kind of sprinkled in the research and insights piece, right? Again, so it's everybody's kind of trying to take a hat tip or a nod to the deeper research analysis, sharing and organizing piece of that, but they're not actually built for that purpose. None of them particularly are. None of the general tools are.
Do you think, this is more of a question I think a lot of SaaS companies kind of struggle with, which is, do you see from these, more established companies that have been, sort of in a similar space, do you see them pivoting? Taking note from Aurelius or otherwise?
Yes, in various different ways, to I guess to various degrees too. So talking about somebody like Product Board, I wouldn't say they pivoted. I would say they certainly pivoted some of their marketing message and targeting.
Without changing.
Absolutely. I don't think their product changed all that much. Now, full disclosure, I don't got any beef with Product Board. I haven't checked out their stuff in a long time. But the fact of the matter is, they, like Airtable, in fact, Airtable is this huge, massively funded company, and they've got this big marketing push where it's like, it's a UX research repository. Well, it's not. It's not. Their message right on their website is spreadsheet plus database. Well, there's a lot of things you can use for spreadsheet plus database, but there's all this manual work and custom setup and sort of tinkering and force fitting that thing. Don't get me wrong, Airtable, super cool, very powerful tool, not built for the purpose at all. So that's one case where, again, I think they pushed pretty hard for a while on UX researchers to really try to gain traction in that segment. And if I would be honest with you, I think they did so successfully. But interestingly enough, you look at now 6-12 months down the line, we've got a lot of those people coming to us because what they found is that, what they were promised versus what they were sold there's a mismatch between that. Just like saying, spreadsheets can solve all your problems in terms of organizing your research. Well, that's true, but there's a lot of baggage that comes with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Kind of shifting gears a little bit. So for let's talk about like very early stage company, right? Company, maybe 10 or so customers, trying to get that traction. If you're looking to invest in kind of different areas, maybe you're still in product development. Like at what point is the right point to start doing UX research? Is it in the conceptual stage? Is it after you have customers? What's the timing of that as an entrepreneur or, kind of startup founder?
So here's the interesting thing that in the way I'm going to answer this for you. We talk a lot about customer development, right? And there are a ton of conversations and interviews with people. I consider that UX research.
Interesting. Okay.
We can call it customer development, and it is, right? So like, I don't actually care what you call it, but you are talking with people when you are gathering intelligence to make an informed decision. That to me is the same practice in UX research. Now, what happens is, UX researchers tend to have maybe a little bit more rigor around who they talk to, how they're deploying that research, how they're analyzing it. Like, you know what I'm saying? In terms of who they recruit, making sure they're removing biases from a lot of the work that they do so that they're providing as much fact to make decision off of as opposed to sort of like, opinion or company politically influenced decisions and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, no matter how strict or how sort of regulated and like on top of your game you are with research, talking to people and using that to make some informed decision about what you're trying to do, that to me, all of that's research. So to that end, by that definition, you should be doing that before you ever write a line of code. You should be doing that before you ever put up a landing page, right? Because if you're just throwing darts at a wall, you might eventually hit. But boy, isn't it nicer if you know where the bullseye is.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. How is that kind of tied into your own personal experience with Aurelius?
Totally. Well, in my case, personally, it's one of the situations where you solve your own problem. I've worked in this space for 15 years now. And so in saying, I think that we should do better in how we organize, analyze, search, and share research is not an opinion. It's a problem that I have to solve. And, so what I did is you just start in a place where you start going, I'm bumping up against this a lot. And you see these kind of things happen on online forums and Slack and conference conversations and all this stuff. And people are like, yeah, I have that challenge too. So that's that initial validation, right? That's not rigorous research, but it is research. It's validating that this is a problem other people experience and is likely worth solving. Now, whether you've got a business there is a whole different podcast, right?
Sure.
But how that relates to me, absolutely. I mean, so you start there and it's very, very informal. But then what you need to do is take it to that next level. And this kind of goes back to your earlier question is when should you start doing research? Once you've identified that there's a problem to solve, that's great. And that's the first step in many cases, right?
Sure.
But just like I was saying, and where I believe UX research fits in is just because you should solve a problem doesn't mean you know how. And so that's where more rigorous UX research comes in to say, okay, let's actually understand that problem. And in terms of making it a business, what are the priority parts of that problem or those set of challenges? And frankly, which ones have the most pain versus return reward, right? Like if we solve that, is that really, really worth your time? You might be super frustrated by this, but nobody cares. And if it doesn't get solved, then it has no effect on, other people's business. And then therefore you're not going to earn anything in terms of your company or build a business off of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point. One other question. So this is, not even tied to the product necessarily, more so to kind of your experiences, running a company. How do you decide, how to price the product?
So
or even to offer it for free in the early stages. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. So I'll start by saying I don't think I'm the right person or even qualified to answer this, but what I will absolutely be happy to do is share how I thought about it. Right.
Okay.
So I just kind of want to like set that
Fair
level
enough.
because there's people out there like Patrick from Price Intelligently they're literally experts on this stuff.
Right.
Patrick's a smart guy. I would encourage anybody to reach out to their company, check out their stuff, read
Good to
their
know.
content. But here's the kind of the way I look at it, right? Offering it for free is fine, especially as you're building it. And, if that currency is really use it, take your time because that time is worth so much to us to improve that product. I think that's totally, totally worth it. Now, in terms of that freemium model, which you see some people do, to me, at least in B2B software, which is what we are, right? Like we don't sell to consumers. It's not like Instagram where we just want a million people to download it. We very much sell to businesses who we would expect find some value in it and then pay us for the work that we've done. Freemium model there is it's a tough scrap because what that typically happens is like you get enough people using that in a freemium plan where you're then looking for an exit, right? So like you almost start the company in hopes of an exit, and that's just because you've acquired so many customers that somebody like an Airtable or an Atlassian or Google or whatever is like, we want that market segment, and so we're going to acquire this product. That was never our intention. And while we would love to provide it for free, we are a completely self-funded company right now, and that's just not a sustainable option. So there's certainly enough people there in terms of even our niche audience, which I would consider is fairly niche. There's enough people there where just operational costs, that wouldn't make a ton of sense. It would be great. We could acquire a bunch of people, but that's not really our target. So then the next step up is like trying to figure out, especially when we first started this, there were no other tools that looked like this, right? People would come to find us. It was a very new topic of conversation. I would argue that it still very much is. There's a lot of companies who have not yet turned the corner in understanding the benefits of a UX research tool like ours. So to that end, what we did is I started looking at, well, what are similar tools people are using in this space? What are they paying for them? And
what are they paying for?
Is it commensurate value that they're getting out of that, right? So you start trying to draw some analogs to that kind of thing. Then I look at the kind of features that we offer, and if somebody were to draw a comparison to say, well, I can take notes in this other tool, or I can capture ideas and group things together in this other tool, and this is what I pay. Trying to draw an analog to that, and then it just kind of evolved from there. So. What happened was, we made some decisions on initial pricing, and at first we had done pricing per project. And we thought that kind of made sense because we figured, well, the more projects you have, the more value you're getting out of the product. And then we later realized that wasn't actually really the case, and it kind of hamstrung some things. So we changed some pricing. We also launched a ton more stuff. And so what we realized too is that now we're in this space where people expect pricing to work a little bit differently just because of their expectations in working with other UX and research type tools. So then it's a matter of like not even totally capturing the value of what your product provides, but almost meeting expectations that these companies have and the needs that they have in the type of space that you're in. And so what I'm referring to there is, if you think about the tool that we've got, the platform that we have, you're capturing customer research, proprietary stuff, things that you don't want elsewhere. So this isn't like signing up for an analytics tool. It's going to spit out some numbers. Not that I'm trivializing that, right? But it's like relatively generic, but it's obviously useful, and you can just sign up. You don't need a big deal. Well, stuff like ours is you're often going through longer procurement process. You're often getting the entire team on board, maybe running it up the flagpole to an executive, making sure they have sign up. There's a lot of process that kind of goes into that. So then you got to start pricing the product to actually meet those needs, again, operationally speaking, as well as in the value they're going to get out of that, because you're talking about delivering this thing at scale. It's not Chris decided Aurelius was cool and signed up to use it for his interviews project. It's this team is going to save X amount of time, say per month, per quarter. And so, what would they have to do otherwise to pay for that? And is your solution compelling enough and valuable enough to say, well, we could just do this? Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Product feedback. So obviously this is kind of the next phase, a little beyond probably, customer research, but definitely in the customer development type of camp. How do you deal with customer feedback, and how do you manage that? Because I think one thing that can be overwhelming to a startup or somebody who's building a product is you get a lot of different and contradicting feedback. from customers, and kind of merging that without like losing your vision or focus.
Absolutely. So the way I've always said that you need to be able to address that kind of thing is by starting with a very clear set of goals, objectives, some sort of success criteria, and honestly having a very clear idea of your mission. So this is where some companies, especially early ones, when they start and they just go, I want to build a cool tool and make a bunch of money and go live in Fiji. You're not going to be able to make very good product and company decisions based on that, because then what you're going to be doing is chasing your own tail based on all this different feedback you've got.
Sure.
Because you're just trying to meet everybody's needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you'll never do that well. Whereas for us, and again, this is because this is the work that I've been doing, say, for 15 years. I've been working with companies to help them define what is it that you're trying to do, right? I can come to you any day and say, I want to build a mobile app. I want to build a mobile app that helps people find interesting books to read. I just made that up. Okay, cool. But what does that actually mean? Why do you want to do that? Who cares about that? What are the most important things? You know what I mean? So like once you have a very clear vision of like the reason why we want to build a mobile app that helps people find interesting books to read, then all of a sudden when you get this feedback, it might be valid. I mean, it's always valid feedback, right? If another human being is using your stuff and they have an opinion on what they're doing, it's valid, but that doesn't mean you have to do something with it, right? It's not to say it's not important, but if you can say, well, their opinion of this fits the mission we're ultimately trying to fulfill, well, then we should probably consider that somewhere on our roadmap or prioritization or however you want to handle that. Again, whole separate podcast, right? And a lot of those decisions also then go into, well, what are going to be the things that we should do or build or improve or change that are going to help us in our company objectives? So if you're very early stage, it's acquiring customers, right? I mean, it's just like, unless you're funded, then maybe it's a bit of a different goal. But for us, we're 100% self-funded, and our goal is, especially early stage, was to acquire more customers. And so if there are things that our product is missing that we know fit the mission and overall,
they have to fit the mission for you to accept them.
Yeah, but just as importantly, if it fits the mission and it's something where, let's say somebody comes along and says, boy, it would be really great if you integrated with Slack. I would probably sign up if you integrated with Slack. I think because the way we work is this and this and this, and part of our mission is to say, well, we want to be able to share research. Well, that makes a ton of sense. We should look into a Slack integration, right?
Yeah.
So that's a perfect example.
Yeah, I think, the question is, you can have, it depends, like you serve multiple functions in your team. When you have marketing people and when you have product people, you can tie those two functions together in a way that can be conflicting in a lot of cases, because you do have a different objective, like as a marketing or sales team, than you do a product team.
Yep.
In most cases. Do you have any kind of illustrative, I guess this could even be from like customers of Aurelius, of feedback taken the wrong way, or even customer insights taken the wrong way, and the mistakes that can result from that?
Yes, absolutely. I would say, now maybe I'm giving myself more credit than I deserve. I don't think we've done that in Aurelius, truly. We have always been very disciplined on what we built, and I think being self-funded forces you to be that way. That's one thing. I'm not saying that I'm some exception to the rule. I mean, we all fall victim to wanting to build cool stuff that maybe isn't super valuable. But I mean, I could give example after example after example of the work I've done in the past. Absolutely. Right. And so a lot of that comes down to, frankly, not doing that solid research. So that's where you move beyond customer development, for example, right? Is where you hear people say, like, it would be really interesting if you did this. Now, if you just took that data point or that statement or that quote and said, well, that's what this means, we've got to build that thing or else our product's incomplete, you're missing many layers of what that means for your business, what that means for the product, whether or not it actually fits with the vision and sort of like where the product is going, and ultimately what purpose that's meant to solve. But, a good example of that is using customer feedback, for example. So in-app feedback forms or website, share your feedback things. If you're just taking that, collecting it, and then acting on it, well, there's no like cognition around that, right? There's no thinking around, well, why are they saying they need to be able to share something to Slack, right? Because then you're not actually getting to the root problem of that. You're just addressing surface level symptoms. for example, right? So if you go into a doctor and you say, my leg hurts, well, they don't just like cast your leg, right? They do x-rays, they move it around, and they see like what hurts,
You need a diagnosis.
What happened, exactly right. So if you're just responding to stuff, well, you're giving people shots of morphine and casting their legs or whatever, and they're walking around all hobbled up, and it's like maybe you feel better for a while, or you don't. And either way, you made a bunch of decisions. You spent a bunch of time, money, and resources on basically a guess or just reacting to stuff.
Does the customer sometimes not know what they want or what they need?
So, yeah, I think not that you meant it this way. I think if we were to subscribe to that, that's a little bit of an arrogant statement, right? Because, again, everybody's feedback is valid. I think it's not their job. It's not their job to articulate it in such a way for us to understand it really well. Sure. That's our job, right? And that's what I say to researchers all the time, particularly with stakeholders, right? So yeah, somebody might come through and go like, this is so frustrating. I wish it was faster. Whatever the case may be, right? So like, let's just say I wish being able to share articles was faster. Now that's the thing that they're trying to do because that's what's presented to them in your tool or your product. But maybe the reality of it is that feature altogether doesn't need to be there, and instead it should do something else, right? But you'll never know that unless you investigate it. Why does it need to be faster to share? Who are you trying to share it with? When you share it, what happens after that? Maybe there's steps you can cut out in the middle, right? Because then what you do is you focus on this thing. Well, we need to improve sharing. Well, maybe that's not the case. Maybe you're improving something that doesn't even need to exist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Kind of fun question. What are the best, in your opinion, people talk about like what's the best UX out there? You know, they're generally talking about like Amazon, Netflix, some of the big companies that get you really addicted. Have you seen great UX from a SaaS company?
Have I seen great UX from a SaaS company? I'll be honest with you. I really like some of the clever things that Slack does. So
really? The
absolutely.
New update in particular, where they have, you can link and, you know, the different, you know, you have DMs, you know, there's a couple of different things they just did, right?
Well, here's what it is, right? You take a look at a company like Slack. The core principle of what they're doing is communications online.
Sure.
There are more companies that have died trying to do that and solve that problem than there are successful, right? Probably by a long shot. Right. And so why is that the case? The Slack isn't doing anything that billions of people haven't tried to already do before. But why is it successful? In my opinion, is because again they take the work out of all these like tiny little things, right? Which sometimes in the field we call micro interactions. And the one really, really brilliant and just beautiful example, in my opinion, is the magic link. You're familiar with the magic link from Slack, right? Is you say, okay, well, I created my account and I need to sign in. But just that little bit of mental load of like remembering your username and password, they're like, don't worry about that. Just click this link.
You got it. Click the link. Yeah.
And that's not
any device. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a monumental feature, but a lot of those little things add up to making a really, really excellent product.
What are some other Slack features that would be, do you think, are equivalent to that? That would surprise, that people don't commonly think about, but utilize nonetheless.
You know, I think the ability for it to integrate essentially with all the tools in the kind of workspace that you want. So it goes beyond just the simple communication, because in reality, I mean, and I'm not an expert in this at all, but if you think about just creating like a chat technology, I mean, so far established that that's not actually all that difficult. I can imagine, right?
Yeah.
But again, what they did is they understood the periphery of that problem. Okay, so we know people need to communicate, but why? So in a business setting, particularly, that's what Slack does really, really well, I would think, is, well, they know, okay, there's all these different things that you're communicating about work. So things like Google Docs and being able to integrate with other tools that send status updates to this channel so that you can then chat about that, right? And again, it's sort of bringing things that are relevant there in the place that you would expect to be able to have that kind of communication about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Do you feel like any of that's redundant, though? This is a conversation we've had recently, which is we have like 1 million Slack integrations, all sorts of everything. And we're using like 5 different project management tools, 5 different marketing dashboards. And it's like, why do I need to look at this? Obviously it is because you can have the conversation, but it's just interesting to me. Some of it feels a little bit like, mental masturbation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that, that's very, very real. And we've heard a lot of people have that kind of challenge too, right? Where you've got now then all these ways to communicate. And then the big push was like, well, let's have them where they all link together, but you still have these properties that stand independently of each other, even though they talk to each other, that it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. Yeah. So you see a lot of people that still, I mean, how many articles have you probably read? Email is dead. Email is dead. Email is dead. Email's not dead. Email's not going anywhere. In fact, there's people trying to improve email right now, like the folks, DHH and those guys over at Basecamp with the new launch of Hey and things like that. So, that it's just not going anywhere. The noise is, I think, what the real challenge there is. I don't know how to solve it. Do I think it's redundant? Maybe. That's very dependent on each person and company and things like that. And this is going to sound weird coming from me as somebody who owns a company that is a tool to help you. Tools are never going to just solve your problem. What I usually tell people,
if they use them in the right way.
Yes. And, you also have to, so it's like, way back in the day when I would do some demos with Aurelius, I would tell people, we're not here to solve the human condition, right? Like if you're not doing good research, Aurelius isn't going to help you with that. So, or if you're not doing enough of it, Aurelius is not going to help you with that. And so there's some things that we've launched recently and that we will continue to work on that are trying to automate things and even add in layers of machine learning and natural language processing. And some people get a little freaked out about that and they say, well, you're trying to take my job. I said, nope, that's the last thing I want to do. What I want to do is take all the things out of your job that machines are just simply better at, so that you can focus on the things you're best at. Now, the reason I bring that up is because your question around, like, is it redundant? Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of things that, frankly, I don't think that we should have to spend time on doing that, these tools, rather than just talking to each other, should take away from us, right? Yeah. So it's kind of like that magic link. Like, I shouldn't have to remember that. There's a way we can do that, and they figured that out. It's a very small, subtle, but beautiful example of that. So it's just making things connect. It's like stringing up a bunch of Christmas lights. It's like, yeah, that's cool. I've got this really big string of Christmas lights. Yeah, you still got to hang them. You still got to figure out how to connect them. You got to figure out the route in which they go and all that stuff. And that's the real challenge of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting statement, but I mean, yeah, I feel like it's a question people are thinking about, kind of more and more now, that, most companies are pivoting to, Slack, Zoom, common household names now. So it's kind of a different world in that sense. Changing gears a little bit. So shifting a little bit into like our realm of expertise per se. Obviously, we've been working together. You've been doing sales calls. I'm curious how you've kind of approached, coming from that product UX background, how have you approached like developing like a sales script, sales process yourself? Is it a similar approach to the way that you kind of build out a product?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I don't know if I've ever thought of it that way, but now that you mention it, I guess I would say that it is because, well, let me just take a step back and say, I do not consider myself a salesperson. And so because of that, when I do these things, when I do outreach, when I jump on calls and demos and all that stuff, I try to make it very clear. And I explicitly state, I'm like, hey, I'm not a salesperson. I'm somebody who's done UX research, product strategy work for 15 years. Like that's who you're talking to. I'm not going to be the person who's going to do that for you. I want you to know who you're talking to first. And because of that, what I did is I spent some time learning why these things are important to folks who do the work that we do.
Right.
And I would say what I did is I learned how to talk about that in a way that, as a good salesperson, I think would do, is going to elicit some kind of emotion and be able to latch on to understand perspective. Because, from an engineering or product person perspective, you're like, this is the product is great. Well, nobody cares about that. They care about what the product does for them.
The benefits, the feelings that it evokes.
Exactly. So that's the part that I would say I worked on, because that's not my background. My background is not in evoking that kind of emotion. My background is trying to build great stuff. But as everybody knows, you can build a great product and launch it on the internet, and nobody will ever come and take a look at you. So there's a lot more to it than that. And that was the part that I had to learn for sure. I would say it's a research process. Absolutely. Paying very close attention to language people use when they describe something. So if they see a feature, or if you ask them to talk about your product, like, what do they say about it? What are the things that they highlight? And more importantly, why? And then using that as you're sort of presenting that to them, right? So you say, well, here's this thing that we built. Here's a part of our product. Here's what we hear people saying it helps them do, and why they enjoy it, and then show it to them. And then, I found some success with that.
Have you templated it out at all?
In terms of like actually writing it down?
Right.
I have not. And, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think the reason why that's true is because it's me doing it. And so again, it's one of those things where it's like, I try to be as absolutely genuine as possible when I do this stuff. And it's like, it helps that people know, like, okay, first of all, I've been in your shoes. I've done your work. I still do your work. I get where you're coming from. Just want you to know that. B, just as importantly, I quite literally helped build this product. So if there's a question, if there's a curiosity, if there's a wonder, any about that stuff, if I can't answer, well, then nobody can. So there's not really a point in scripting it out. If I don't have that answer, if I don't know how to talk about that, then writing it down isn't really going to solve that problem.
Do you think you could train someone to replicate that? Because I think this is a lot of, obviously most founders, right, they're the initial salesperson for the product to begin with, both, with investors, stakeholders, and customers. Do you think you can, obviously you are the best salesperson, best face for the product because you built it, but do you think you could replicate that, the being genuine and having that interest in them that you have in another person, whether it be a sales rep or somebody else?
So this is something I've actually given a lot of thought to for a while.
I imagine. Yeah.
And yes, okay, I have a couple different tracks to answer this from. Yes, I think I could absolutely train somebody to replicate that, to do the demo the way that I do. No question. I could set that out. I could script it out. They're all very, very similar, right? So they're not
Similar
like
path. Yeah, it's not a different story every time. No.
Absolutely not. So I could totally do that. I think that that's very repeatable. Here's the rub, and you already mentioned it. Can you train somebody to be genuine? No. And so, like, you
have to kind of pre-select.
That's what it is. So here's the thing that I've thought about a lot with that. If we come to the point, we come to the day where we need to add people who are able to take on more of this and do that kind of thing. I'll be very, very honest with you. I don't think I would hire a salesperson. You know what I think I would do?
You'd hire somebody else.
I would hire a researcher who cares a lot about this, because I care a lot about this. And I would hire a researcher. And I would say, here's what we want you to do. We want you to help other folks like us see how this tool helps them. That's it.
Interesting approach.
Because it's not selling anything. You're trying to help people. You're just trying to provide them value. And that's all I do on a demo. I start every single demo by not saying a word about Aurelius. I say, I would love to learn more about your team, your company, how you're doing this today, what made you interested in what we're trying to do.
You have to be that way. Yeah.
The first 15 minutes are me just trying to learn more about who they are, what's going on. And the thing is because my lived experience, my professional experience, I can likely relate to a lot of that. And I go, yep, been there, heard that. We get this a lot. I've got some ideas on how I can walk you through this stuff, show you what we got, answer other questions. And then what it is too, is you've also established a little bit of trust, right? Like in my case, I can establish a lot of trust. Yeah. In my case, I can establish a bit of rapport because of my background and some of the things that I've done. But in spite of that, if nobody knows who I am, then why would they want to?
You talk, it's, it's that you can relate to them.
Absolutely.
It just comes across naturally. So
yeah. And the thing is I think people can tell when I do that. I think they can tell that I actually want to learn about them. Like I actually want to hear.
Oh yeah.
How are you working? Because we've all been on demos. It's like, hey everyone, tell us about your team and your company. And it's like, really, you were just doing that as an icebreaker, and you didn't care. You were waiting for your turn to talk. Yeah. The demo. And I think people can tell that that's not the case. I'm like, no, I want to, because there's often times where I'm asking a lot of questions like, oh, okay, so you're doing that. Like, why is that the case? And maybe it doesn't even relate to this, but I just want to learn more about how they're working.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we always tell people to only ask questions. I mean, you have some scenarios where people do have salespeople doing those intro calls, and it's just a disaster because people don't want to, how can you kind of just shoot in the dark, right? without knowing. And it's also just, establishing the connection. And you really can't do that without, learning more about them per se.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with UX and research. And I've said this a long, long time ago. You can teach people how to build a product. You can't necessarily just teach people how to build the right product. And it's the same thing in sales, in my opinion. You can teach people how to do a sales demo. You can't teach people how to care about the problem you're trying to help people solve. That's just something you got to have. And if you've got that, then you can probably be great at giving demos and doing sales.
Interesting comment. Yeah. I mean, I've observed that so many times. And I think for you guys in particular, I think that is probably to hire an actual researcher to do the sales type job. I think is a best, way of looking at it, both from a culture perspective, but also just logistically, it just makes more sense.
Yep.
Cool. I think we got a lot of good stuff here. If you could leave us with some closing thoughts, particularly, in knowing, who our audience is, what are 3 kind of takeaways that you've learned from Aurelius and, your 15 years of experience in UX and research?
Totally. Okay. The first one I would say is, don't think that you can just build a great product and have a great business. Have an audience, understand that audience. In fact, I would argue, if you can, learn about how to build and grow that audience or attention first, because then the more you understand them, and then more rapport you can kind of build with that.
You have to know the audience. You can't just go in.
Yeah, that community is. Then you can say, well, I've been here. I understand you. You know me. And then, by the way, here's this thing that I've been working on. That's one thing. The second one is, again, it has to do with product. Now, my background being in product, that's my wheelhouse. That's where I kind of love to work and play. But the reality of it is a successful business is so much more than a great product. So a couple things I would say there. A, have a great product. Never stop focusing on having a great product. But B, make decisions that influence the things that surround a product, like how you market it, how you talk about it, where you find that audience and channel to people who would be interested in find value in the thing that you've done. Don't put blinders on and just say, well, this is what I'm good at. We're going to build a great product and think everything else will fall into line, because I'm almost certain it won't.
Well, yeah.
I don't know how many that was. That was. Hopefully it was 3.
Yeah, I think it was. But cool. Yeah. Where can people could find, we'll link the product and everything for people to check out. What's the best way for people to find you, follow you, figure out what's going on?
Yeah. Our website's.
Are you on TikTok or?
No, I am not on TikTok. I think I'm just at that age enough where I have no idea what's going on with TikTok.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid you won't be able to find me on TikTok,
yeah.
But you're more than welcome to email me.
Yeah.
You can definitely find us on the site, and if you go there, we do have the chat on the site. If you use that, I actually do my best to answer everyone personally.
Nice.
So you won't be talking to a bot. Chances are you're talking to me. So you're welcome to use that as well, and always happy to chat and help people out.
Cool. Good stuff. No CMO Podcast, episode 27.